Welcome to the Bodhi Academy. My name is Shrutika and today let us continue with our chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. So we have seen male gamete, we have seen female gamete, we have seen the development of both of them, that is male and female gametogenesis, and we have seen the structures. So now let us go forward with this chapter, and today we are going to learn about pollination and what happens after pollination and what happens after the male and female gamete unites. So this we are going to cover in today's video. So first thing what we are going to see is pollination. Just after formation of the gametes, what is important is transfer of those gametes to the female part. So how this happens? This happens through the process called pollination. So pollination is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. That is from the anther. Anther is the part where the pollen grains, that is the male gamete, gets matured. After maturation, the anther bursts and the pollen grains are liberated into the surrounding air. From there, the pollen grain then comes and settles on the stigma, and this process is called as pollination. So there are different kinds of pollination. First kind of pollination is autogamy. Autogamy is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower. So this happens in the same flower, that is the anther, and the anther will get transferred on the stigma of the same flower. Then autogamy is of two types. That is chelysogamy, that flowers which do not open. Chelysogamy flowers are autogamous as there is no chance of cross pollination leading on the stigma. So schistogamous flowers produce assured seed set even in the absence of pollinator. Then comes chasmogamy, exposed anther and stigma. So here what happens, this is also an autogamy, but here the stigma and the anthers are exposed. And in chelystogamy what happens is the stigma and the anthers are not exposed. The flowers are very tiny and it is embedded inside the flowers. So the next type of pollination is geitonogamy. Geitonogamy is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a different flower or of the same plant. So but here what happens is the pollen grain from one flower will get settled on the stigma of another flower on same plant. It may be on same plant or different plant, but it is the anther, the pollen grain from one anther will go and settle to the stigma of another flower anther. Then comes xenogamy. Xenogamy is the transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of different plants, flowers of the same species. So this is a cross pollination. So these are the different kinds of pollination. Now let us see which are the agents of pollination, as in how this pollination occurs. We have seen different kinds of pollination. Now we are going to see what causes this pollination, as in what are the agents of pollination. So the agents of pollination include biotic agent, that is the non-living agents like water and wind. Then the abiotic agents, that are non-living agents, that is water and wind, and biotic, that is the living agents, as in the living organism which helps in the pollinations are insect, butterfly, honeybees, etc. Large number of pollen grains are produced by plants using abiotic modes of pollination, as most of the pollen grains are wasted during the transfer. So how this pollination, how the flowers are adapted to certain kind of pollination. First is wind pollination. The pollen grains will be light, non-sticky and winged because it is pollinated by wind. The anthers are exposed, large and feathery, so that the anthers has to be exposed so that the pollen grains are exposed and so that it can be carried away by the wind. Then the flowers are one ovule arranged as inflorescence. Example of wind pollination is in corncob, cotton, date plant. Then comes wind pollination. So water pollination, it happens in bryophyte, pteridophytes and algae. Pollen grains protected by mucilaginous cover, that is freshwater plants like hydrilla, vallisneria, seagrass, etc. Then comes insect pollination, wherein the flowers are large, colorful, fragrant, rich in nectar, so that they can attract the insects. And the pollen grains are sticky, so that the pollen grain gets stick to the body of the insect. And the stigma is also sticky, so that it the pollen grains from the body of the insect get attached to the stigma surface. So these are some adaptation in flowers regarding the pollination. Now let us see what will happen after the pollen grain comes and gets settled on the stigma. So the pistil has the ability to recognize. So this interaction between the pollen and the pistil is called as pollen-pistil interaction. So what happens over here now? So we know that now pollination is what? It is the transfer of the pollen grain from the anther to the stigma, okay, to the stigma of the flower. So this we know now how this happens. Now we are going to study how this process happens, as in what will happen after the pollen grain gets settled on the stigma. Okay, so now let us see what is pollen-pistil interaction. So what is pollen-pistil interaction? So we all know that this is the stigma of the flower, which is the female part, and this is the ovary, which consists of the tiny gametes that are female gametes called as ovule. So once the pollen grain comes and settles on the stigma, what happens is the pistil has the ability to recognize the compatible pollen to initiate the post-pollination event that leads to fertilization. So pollen grain produce pollen tube through the germ pore to facilitate the transfer of male gamete to the embryo sac. So now what will happen over here? So we all know that we have studied the structure of the pollen grain, that is there is intine, exine, and there is a germ pore over here. Yes or no? This is the germ pore. So what will happen? There is secretion secreted by the stigma, which consists of what? It consists of water plus sugar, and this is required by the pollen grain to germinate. So this is the germ pore. This, once it receives the water and sugar from the stigma, it will start to germinate, as in form a pollen tube. Yes, and we also know that this consists of two nuclei. So this is what the male gametes has to get fused with the female gametes. So here this consists of what? This is the structure of the ovule. Yes, and the ovule consists of the embryo cell. So this has to get fused with the embryo cell. This is called as pollen-pistil interaction. So what happens? So now it got the required condition, so it will start forming the pollen tube. This pollen tube will start to travel down the ovary and then into the embryo sac, where the fertilization will occur. So along with the tube, the nuclei which are there, the generative and the vegetative nuclei, will also start traveling down into the embryo sac of the ovule. So this is how pollen-pistil interaction happens in the plants. So now let us see what will happen after the pollen tube reaches the ovule and how the fusion of the gametes will take place. So this process is called as fertilization. And why is it called double fertilization? Let us understand now. So after entering one of the synergids, each pollen grain releases two male gametes. One male gamete fuses with the egg cell and other male gamete fuses with the polar nucleus to produce what? Primary endosperm nucleus. And this, since there is two types of fusion taking place in the embryo sac, this phenomena is called as double fertilization. So how these things happen now? So this is how the pollen-pistil interaction happens, that is the pollen grain gets germinated and then it travels down to the ovary into the ovules and into the embryo cell. So after this what will happen is this is the two male gametes. What will happen is one gamete will fuse with the egg cell, okay, and one gamete will fuse with the two polar nucleus. So what will happen is this fusion will cause what? Endosperm formation, and this fusion with the male gamete with the egg apparatus will form what? The zygote, and hence there is two times fertilization occurring at the same time. This is termed as double fertilization in plants. So this is the phenomena of double fertilization, wherein what will happen is this, if this is the embryo sac, okay, these are your antipodal cell, these are your synergids, this is the egg cell, okay, and this is the two polar nucleus. So what will happen is, in first case what will happen is the male gamete will fuse with the two polar nucleus, which will form the primary endosperm nucleus. So this will result in endosperm, and the second male gamete will fuse with the egg apparatus, okay, or egg nucleus. This will result in formation of the zygote. So in this process what is happening is twice the fertilization process is happening, hence it is termed as double fertilization. So what we have covered in today's video is what is double fertilization, how the pollen-pistil interaction happens in plant, which are the agents of pollination, and how the flowers are adapted to this pollination, which are the kinds of pollination, and what is pollination. So these are the things which we have covered in today's video. So thank you for watching today's video. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe to the Bodhi Academy.